Millions of people walking the earth today carry a profound genetic secret locked away in their cells, and the vast majority of them have absolutely no idea it exists. Perhaps you have always believed your ancestry is a straightforward story. You might look at your family tree and see a solid, unbroken line of English, Irish, French, or Eastern European heritage. But when modern commercial DNA test results are unsealed, a startling, undeniable truth frequently emerges. Your genetic code might be hiding ancient fragments from the icy shores of Scandinavia. For centuries, the narrative we were fed was brutally simple. The Vikings descended from the frozen north. They raided, they burned, they terrified the coastal towns of Europe. And then, just as rapidly as they appeared, they vanished back into the mists of history. However, modern genetic science has completely overturned this simplistic historical script. History was wrong, or rather, it intentionally ignored a fundamental truth about human survival, migration, and integration. By peering deeply into the double helix of our DNA, we do not merely find the seafaring raiders of the 8th century. We touch a truth that is vastly older. To truly comprehend the origins of what we now call Viking DNA, we cannot begin in the Middle Ages. We must rewind the clock thousands of years further back, returning to a harsh, unforgiving prehistoric world where the true genesis of these genetic markers began. Let us travel back approximately 12,000 years to an era when the Earth was just beginning to emerge from the brutal climax of the last ice age. The Scandinavian peninsula at this time was not a landscape where human beings could survive. It was crushed beneath colossal, kilometer-thick continental ice sheets. As global temperatures gradually began to warm and the glaciers retreated northward, they carved out and revealed a new, virgin territory, a rugged, pristine, and incredibly harsh frontier. The first pioneers to step foot into this newly thawed world were not the towering, blonde-haired warriors popularized by Hollywood and Victorian Romanticism. Archaeological and archaeogenetic evidence reveals that the earliest prehistoric inhabitants of Scandinavia were a fascinating blend of two distinct hunter-gatherer populations. First came the Western hunter-gatherers, WHG, who migrated northward from southern Europe, walking across a massive prehistoric land bridge known as Doggerland, a fertile territory that connected ancient Britain to mainland Europe before being swallowed by the rising North Sea. Shortly after, the Eastern hunter-gatherers, EHG, migrated from the regions of modern-day Russia, navigating the treacherous, icy corridors of the far north. The convergence of these two prehistoric groups birthed a unique population known to scientists as the Scandinavian hunter-gatherers, SHG. These ancient people carried incredibly resilient survival mutations within their blood. For instance, scientific data shows that modern non-African populations carry roughly 1% to 2% neanderthal DNA, a remnant of crossbreeding that occurred tens of thousands of years prior. This ancient introgression provided crucial immune system boosts and cold weather adaptations necessary for surviving the extreme latitudes of the prehistoric north. As millennia passed, a third massive wave of prehistoric migration occurred around 5,000 years ago. Nomadic pastoralists, known as the Yamnaya, swept outward from the Pontic-Caspian steppes. They brought with them revolutionary technologies, wheeled carts, bronze metallurgy, and the roots of the Indo-European languages. They also brought an entirely new wave of genetics that crashed into northern Europe. It was precisely this deep, prehistoric melting pot, the ancient hybridization of Ice Age survivalists, Doggerland refugees, and steppe nomads, that forged the biological foundation for the people who, thousands of years later, history would brand as the Vikings. Therefore, when we discuss Viking DNA, we are actually looking at a biological time machine that carries the direct legacy of the Ice Age. So, if these genetic roots are so deeply entrenched and widely spread, why were we taught that the Vikings were merely a passing storm? Why were they framed as temporary invaders rather than foundational ancestors? The answer lies in the intersection of medieval fear and modern politics. For a long time, the written historical record was dominated by the victims of Viking raids. The chronicles were penned primarily by Christian monks, whose monasteries were the prime targets for looting. Naturally, their accounts emphasized catastrophic destruction, pagan savagery, and the alien nature of the attackers. The quieter, slower reality of intermarriage, farming, and cultural integration left behind far fewer dramatic tales for the history books. Furthermore, as European nations evolved from fractured medieval fiefdoms into unified modern states, they desperately needed cohesive, pure origin stories. Building a strong national identity required a clear line between us and them. Admitting that terrifying foreign invaders had essentially become the nation's forefathers complicated the narrative. It blurred the sacred lines of national purity. Consequently, the Viking was pushed out of the family tree and into the realm of myth, transformed into a perpetual outsider. In England, Norse settlers were quietly absorbed into the broader Anglo-Saxon identity. In France, the Viking founders of Normandy were rebranded simply as Normans. The genetic truth was actively erased by political storytelling. But while parchment can be rewritten, DNA cannot lie. In 2020, the scientific journal Nature published one of the most comprehensive ancient DNA studies ever conducted. Researchers sequenced the genomes of 442 Viking-era skeletons, recovered from burial sites across Scandinavia, the British Isles, Eastern Europe, and Greenland. The mission was to map ancient genetic signatures and compare them to modern populations. The results shattered historical misconceptions. First and foremost, the study proved that Vikings were not genetically uniform. Even within the heartlands of Scandinavia, researchers found individuals buried with full Viking honors and artifacts who possessed DNA tracing back to southern Europe, the Baltics, and even parts of Asia. This was a profound revelation. Viking was not an ethnicity. It was a culture, a job description, and a lifestyle. It was an incredibly mobile alliance that assimilated people from various backgrounds who shared their maritime ambitions. Secondly, the genetic impact of their expansion was exponentially deeper than historians had estimated. In the Yorkshire region of England, and particularly in the Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland, modern DNA samples reveal that up to 25% of the male lineages trace directly back to Norse Y-DNA haplogroups. In Ireland, genetic heat maps glow brightly around coastal cities like Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick, all of which were originally founded as Norse trading ports. Deep into Eastern Europe, along the ancient river trade routes winding through modern-day Russia and Ukraine, the genetic seeds planted by the Varangians, Eastern Vikings, continue to thrive. The data unequivocally shows that they did not merely raid and retreat. They stayed. They built farms. They married local women. In Iceland, mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited strictly from the mother, paints a vivid picture of this integration. Scandinavian men heavily intermingled with Celtic women brought from the British Isles. Over centuries, languages shifted, surnames were localized, and borders changed. The visible signs of the Norse faded away, but their genetic markers sank deeply into the European gene pool, diluted, yet eternally persistent. To ground this vast historical sweep in reality, consider the modern, real-life story of a man named James. James is a traditional boat builder living on the northeastern coast of England. His family has resided in the same coastal village for over 400 years. If you look at his family tree, it is filled entirely with standard, recognizable Anglo-Saxon names. There is no recorded history of foreign immigration. Yet, When James took a commercial DNA test, he was bewildered to discover he carried nearly 18% Scandinavian DNA. More importantly, a deep dive into his paternal Y DNA revealed he belonged to haplogroup 11. This specific genetic marker is a perfect bridge connecting the Viking Age to our prehistoric past. The 11 mutation first appeared in Europe roughly 27,000 years ago, carried by the Paleolithic hunter-gatherers wandering the frozen tundras. Over tens of thousands of years, this haplogroup became heavily concentrated in the Scandinavian peninsula. When men carrying this exact genetic marker sailed down to northern England in dragon-headed longships during the 9th century, they were implanting the blood of Ice Age survivors into British soil. For James, the DNA result did not just mean he had a distant Viking grandfather. It meant his veins carried a biological frequency that had survived the harshest epochs of human history. Even his family's traditional trade, boat building, a deep affinity for the ocean, and the use of ancient clinker-built boat designs, felt less like a coincidence and more like a cultural echo from a prehistoric era, when his ancestors had to master the sea to survive. So, what is the ultimate lesson we can draw from this hidden genetic history? Written history often tries to draw rigid borders, neatly categorizing humanity into boxes: natives versus invaders, or pure versus foreign. But human biology cares nothing for lines drawn on maps, and DNA is entirely indifferent to political pride. The genetic truth, pulsing through the veins of millions today, proves a timeless, beautiful principle. Humanity has always been in motion. From the first prehistoric bands walking across the lost continent of Doggerland, to the steppe nomads riding westward, to Norse sailors braving the North Atlantic, our true history is not a tale of isolated, pure-blooded tribes. It is a magnificent story of blending and integration. The persistence of Viking DNA is an undeniable reminder that no nation and no bloodline is entirely pure. The people we were taught to view as terrifying foreign enemies eventually became the very ancestors whose blood keeps our hearts beating today. When we look deep into our prehistoric past, we realize the biological differences dividing us are merely superficial strokes on a vast canvas. We are all, ultimately, mosaics of ancient travelers.